Round one of the NRL season surprised most. 6 upsets got up. We went to Vegas and everything else in between. Let's see what round two has in store. What's going on, guys? It's your boy Burgz back at it again for another week of tipping videos. That's right, we got round two up on the docket this week, but I've got to say, how good was round one? It was great to see football. We moved over to Vegas. We came back here in Australia over a 2-week span, and it was absolutely electric. There was some crazy fixtures that happened this week. 6 upsets got up, and I got to tell you, not a lot of people did well in tipping comps. And speaking of tipping comps, let's take a look at the casual athlete tipping comp this year. And I've got to say a big congratulations to RP Koala Kings. Brandon there for getting 7 out of 8 tips correct. He's the only person in the entire tipping comp to do so, claiming number 1 spot. I am there in the top 10 there, as you can see. I just changed my tip to the Broncos. Now that is gonna cost me, I think, in the long run there, but congratulations to all of those players that made it into the top 10 this week. I will be revealing the top 10 of our tipping comp each and every week here on the Casual Athletes, so stay tuned and maybe give us a shout out in the comments if you see your name listed there. But on ya, RP Koala Kings, that is good stuff. Next, let's just have a look at my tips for round one. And guys, I gotta say, on my tipping videos, this is what it's based off. The tipping video that I did a few weeks ago, if you actually watched that, you would have got 6 out of 8, and I did not back myself with that Broncos Roosters game. As you can see there, I tipped the Roosters in my tipping video. If only I had listened to myself, I would have had 6 out of 8 last week. But I thought Manly played very well against the Rabbitohs. I was quietly confident in that game. I just didn't think the Rabbitohs would come out with the same energy, and Manly bashed them up straight up in that first game in Vegas. They just came out of the blocks flying, and took a little while to keep going, but the good thing and the encouraging thing for me with Manly was they were always creating chances. They just couldn't ice them. With the Roosters, they were solid in defense, and we know about the Broncos. They are an extremely good attacking team. They were trying to play, I think, the kind of footy that saw them go all the way to the grand final last year, and you just can't do that in round one, whereas the Roosters' game plan, a lot more simple, very round one based football. The Knights, on the other hand, moving on to our third game there, just disappointed. Again, I think similar to the Roosters, they tried to play very edge-to-edge football. There wasn't much action happening down the middle, and the Raiders just, kicked long, completed their sets, and ended up breaking the camel's back in the end. It was a pretty close game for a lot of it, but the Raiders just ran away with it there in the end. And I've got to mention Zach Hosking, the new Raider there on the edge. He had a fantastic game, as did Hudson Young, apart from the sin bin, of course. But the 2 edge back rowers for the Raiders were absolutely outstanding. The Warriors, I was just really disappointed in this game. I thought it was reffed quite poorly, to tell you the truth. The Sharks really only seemed to get any advantage in the game off the back of penalties. I'm not taking too much away from the Sharks. They did win this game, but I do think the Warriors were stiffed a little bit there. I did tip them. I do expect the Warriors to bounce back. They're a good team, and hopefully they get the win in round 2 as well. We'll have a look at see who they're playing. With the Storm, again, I didn't change that tip. I probably should have, considering the amount of outs that the Storm had, with Nelson Asofa-Solomona not being available, and then the introduction of Joe Chan and Munster coming in and out as well. We didn't know what was happening there, and I've got to tell you, it was possibly one of the most boring round 1 fixtures I've ever watched. And you wouldn't think about that. If you're a defensive savant, then you must have had a great day watching this game. But I've got to tell you, it was just a slugfest. A lot of errors. Both teams didn't look anywhere near their best, but the Storm grinded it out and they got that 8-0 victory and the 1-12 there. Parramatta, they were always winning that game. I had no reason to tip the Dogs, and when I watched the Dogs play, they didn't really give me any regrets in tipping the Eels. I got to say, the Eels weren't 100% convincing. I thought Bryce Cartwright looks like he's almost taken a leap from last year. Dragons, I wasn't as confident in this game, but They got the win and looked dominant against the Titans side that didn't really offer much. I thought Keanu Kinney, his first real proper game at the back, struggled for the Titans. I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do in the absence of Jaden Campbell, and they just didn't look like they had any firepower. Tino tried his heart out as usual, but it just looked very clunky and like a Titans side that hadn't trained all preseason together, and it was very evident from the foreign Fafita, Jaden Campbell being out as well. And finally, the competition leaders after one round are my North Queensland Cowboys, and they got the win 13 plus. And I've got to say, I wasn't surprised. The Dolphins last year had a lot of hype around them. Yes, they came out in round one and destroyed the Roosters, but to me, that didn't really have any weight coming into this year. The Cowboys were off their game all last year. I think towards the end of the year, they showed a little bit of a groove, and I just think in this game, Drinkwater was class. I thought Val Holmes and Zach Labart as our centers were the best players on the field for us, especially Val Holmes. He was taking some crazy good runs down the middle, really getting involved, and I think he really probably felt towards the end of last year when the Cowboys could have probably made a run towards the finals that sitting on the sideline for a suspension was probably not the place he wanted to be, and he definitely looked like he wanted to make up for it in this game. Just a reminder, before we get into my tips for round two, guys, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. We bring out so much content each and every week, fantasy tipping videos. We are looking for a lot more as well, so please make sure that you give us some ideas down in the comments as well. It's not too late to join our tipping comp and fantasy comps. I'll leave those links in the description for you. Just make sure that you join us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok as well. Now, let's get into my tips for round two. The first game for round two is the Broncos taking on the Rabbitohs on Thursday night footy. In the last 10 games between these two teams, the Broncos have only won 4 out of those 10 games, with the Rabbitohs really winning the fixture, I would say, a couple of years ago. For the Broncos, Piakura should be back from his head knock. I know he wasn't exactly everyone's favourite fantasy pod in that first round, but I do think for Piakura, he is young and there's been a lot of talk about him as well, and I think that he will bounce back pretty quickly from that. In this game, both teams lost. Both teams went to Vegas and put up pretty unimpressive performances. I think South showed a little bit more in attack than the Broncos did, but South's defense was just horrendous. They were all over the shop, especially on the edges. Turbo was finding a lot of holes, and to me, I think that really sets Brisbane up well in this game. I think that Reece Walsh, on the back of some block plays from the forwards, I think Brisbane missed Flegler a little bit down the middle last week. I don't think that Payne Haas, and I do not think that they should ever move Carrigan from the middle. Just the role that he plays in the middle is so pivotal to the way that Brisbane want to play football that I don't understand why Kevin Walters would move him from the lock position. He was very ineffective out on the edge. Yes, he's a good defender, but other than that, I just don't see him getting much ball, and that's what you want. You want Carrigan and Haas working as a tandem down the middle, and they took that away from themselves. I don't understand why they did that. They could have put maybe someone else there, would have given up maybe a couple of extra points, but I just think that the way that Brisbane want to play, Carrigan needs to be in the middle. He can't be out on the edge, and I think it was a poor coaching decision there from Kevy Walters. For Souths, they just lacked a bit of energy last week, and I won't say that about Latrell. I thought Latrell actually came out and played very well. I just don't think he was backed up by the rest of his team. They didn't look up for it. They didn't look ready for it. I thought Manly got the jump on them. And yes, they kept Manly at bay for a little bit. A few attacking glimpses. I thought Damien Cook actually looked quite good as opposed to some of his form last year. But in this particular matchup, I've got to go Brisbane. I just think with Manly's attack being a bit similar to the way Brisbane play, and the first game being at Suncorp for the year, that the South Sydney Rabbitohs will start the season 0-2. I'm going to go to the Broncos, 13 plus. The second game of round two takes us to PointsBet Stadium, where the Sharks will be taking on the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. And for these two teams over the last 10 games, the Sharks have dominated the fixture, winning 8 out of the last 10 games. They're also on a 7-game winning streak against the Dogs. The Dogs have not beaten the Sharks since 2021, and you can't really expect that to be any different, considering how bad the Dogs have been over the last 3 years or so. I do think in this game, Cronulla are easily favourites. They shouldn't be anything less than $1.20 to win this game. Canterbury gave me no reason to tip them last week. I just don't know if the combinations that they necessarily want to work are going to work. Blake Taff looked a little bit out of his depth at fullback last week. I think he's been given that role as a kind of common courtesy. Is like, yeah, mate, we signed you, so you're a specialist fullback. Let's give you a crack at the position. I don't know if it's going to be the right one. You got Bronson Jerry, who's back from 4 years out of the game, sitting in reserve grade right now. Don't know if that's the best option. They've got Crichton, who is an extremely creative player, but in a team like the Dogs, he's not going to get much ball out in the centres. You need to interject him into a position where he feels free to roam and inject himself into the game, and that's where I think Crichton could excel. Burton and Hutchison, despite being big bodies, do not seem to want to run the ball hard or want to inject themselves into the line. They struggled really against Parramatta, and yeah, I didn't think Parramatta's defense was particularly spectacular. I mean, they gave away 3 line breaks, but man, I just think the Dogs are lacking a bit of polish. Josh Adokar getting injured really early in that game didn't really help their case, but I think Cronulla, they may have a few outs too. We're waiting on Mulatalo and Talakai's fitness, so we'll see how they pull up. Could be a spot for KL Iro. May not know. We know how many big fans I am of KL Iro. But I think the Sharks should get this one done pretty easily. I'm going to go the Sharks, 13+. The next match for round 2 is a good old Battle of the West, where the Penrith Panthers will be taking on the Parramatta Eels out at Penrith. And I got to say, for Penrith, they must be very disappointed after round 1, not scoring a point, especially losing the World Club Challenge as well. It doesn't look good at this stage for Penrith. I've got to say, Dylan Edwards needs to go back to just growing his hair. I'm not liking the bald look from him right now. That's just a personal gripe of mine. But for Parramatta, I thought they were a little bit inconsistent in their first game. Could have probably put a few more points on the board against the Dogs, but it wasn't an overly dominant showing. And I think for Para, they have one way of playing. They've had the same way of playing for, I'd say, 3 or 4 years now. It's very Reg, Barlow dominant. And then Moses plays off the back of that. Moses did pick up a bit of a groin problem. Could be something to look out for as well. I don't think that the Panthers are going to lose potentially 3 games in a row, especially out in front of their home fans at Penrith. But these games are so grindy, so gritty, and they're always good to watch. There's been so many close fixtures between these two teams, especially over the last 3 or 4 years. And in the last 10 fixtures, it's pretty even. Penrith winning 6 with Para winning 4, but Para have won the last 2 against Penrith. So, yeah, I'm very inclined to tip Parramatta in this one, but I just feel like Penrith, they copped a slap in the face last week, and, the Storm kind of pulled their pants down, and they just don't really have the polish that they need at this stage of the season. I think Penrith, again, will warm into the season quite well, but just at the moment, it's looking really clunky and out of place. It's almost as if they're struggling to gel at this point, and I wouldn't really say that about a team that's gone, back to back to back premiers. I just think Parramatta, they're a bit clunky last week. They always get up for this game. Out at Penrith, though, I'm not liking their chances. They did beat them there last year, but not really saying much. It was around Origin time. So I'm going to go the Panthers in this one, 1-12. Your Super Saturday starts in Canberra for round 2, where the Raiders will be taking on the Tigers. First time we're going to be seeing the Tigers in their 25th year as a joint club. for 2024. So that's exciting for all Tigers fans, and they've got 2 points on the board as well. For the Raiders last week, I thought they played extremely well. For a team that didn't have much hype about them coming into the season, but to play the way that they played, they just played no nonsense footy. They completed high, they kicked long, and they just grind the Knights down to a point where the Knights needed to score points and started making errors. And the Raiders capitalised on the back of that towards the end of the game and ended up winning by a lot more than probably what the average punter would suggest. In this game, the Raiders should get Seb Chris back. He's due to be back in round 2. They may have to wait on Danny Levi. Not sure about the quad injury that he picked up, but he played big minutes in that game on Friday night as well. So keep your eye on that one. For the Tigers, they are very interesting this week. Anything could be happening. Benji could name anyone, and I wouldn't be surprised who is on the team sheet. So I expect it to be Aiden Caesar and Jaden Sullivan in the halves. As far as the outside backs go, I have absolutely no idea what is going to happen there. Just for the Tigers, in this fixture, it's not looking very good for them. In any fixture, I would say, really, over the last 5 years or so, it doesn't really look good for them. They've lost 8 out of the last 10 games to the Raiders, although the Raiders did lose to them in 2023 when they only won 4 games. So, yeah, I do think that the Tigers have a shot in this game. It'll depend on the amount of rest, how good you think the Tigers are going to be this year. I don't think that they're going to be that great, but again, right now I'm at the point where I haven't really tipped much upsets this week, and a lot of upsets happened last week. So it's getting to the point where, do I tip the Tigers? Thinking about it, the Raiders can be a little bit inconsistent. The Tigers have the bye. This will be their first game this year. They'll want to show the rest of the comp that they are a legitimate first grade team, because there's so many jokes going around about them that they should be relegated. I don't think that for the Tigers. I like the Tigers being in our competition. I don't want to see them, go into this, relegation competition or any relegation talk. I think they are better with the front office situation now. Whether that has galvanized them at any point. I mean, they did lie about how many members they have. I keep feel like I'm ragging on the Tigers a little bit, but I haven't had to talk about them much this year. They're only playing their first game this week. So, yeah, let's get to the game, though. I think the Raiders will win this one, but I actually think the Tigers will make it close. They did have a very close matchup with the Raiders last year that ended in a bit of field goal, penalty goal controversy from memory. So, yeah, I think the Raiders get this one done, but I do expect it to be close because it's the Raiders in inconsistency versus the Tigers' ability at this point in time. So I'm going to go the Raiders 1-12. The second game up on Super Saturday is my North Queensland Cowboys taking on the Newcastle Knights at Queensland Country Bank Stadium. For the Cowboys, it was a great performance last week. I have no bones to pick with any of the play that the Cowboys did. One thing that I loved from the Cowboys is they run it on the last tackle. There was a lot of that happening. They came up with a lot of good fortune on those plays. Particularly, I think down the left side, I think Holmes and Dearden and Taulagi are working together really well. Lukey was great. Nanai had a great game as well. Got to mention him, and Zach Laybut, as I mentioned earlier as well. I do think for the Knights, they could bounce back, although in this fixture, though, it really hasn't gone their way over the last 10 games. The Cowboys have won 7 out of the last 10 games against the Knights. So, yeah, it's not looking a favourable fixture for the Knights, especially in Queensland. We tend to get the wind over them over there. For the Knights as well, they're dealing with a few injuries at the moment. Anari Tawala went down in last week's game, so be disappointed that he can't come back and play the Cowboys. I expect Tom Jenkins to take that spot. And then I'm hearing that Jaden Brayley might play, but I wouldn't hold my breath with Jaden. I think they'll probably want to wrap him in cotton wool and make sure that he is 100% ready to go, because just with his injury history, you can't risk something like that. In this game, I don't really expect any surprises. If they do happen, I expect the Knights to score a few more points than they scored last week. But other than that, I expect the Cowboys to win this game 13+. The final game on Super Saturday takes us down to Amy Park, where the Storm will be playing the Warriors. And I got to tell you, in this matchup, It is an absolute slaughter for the Warriors. They haven't beaten the Storm since 2015. 9 years since the Warriors have beaten the Storm, whether that be home or away. The Warriors have so many outs right now to deal with. A big injury toll at the moment. I think Capewell's nursing some ribs. I think Chance Nickel Clockstad won't be back until round 4. I'm hearing they got Niokore with a foot injury. It's just looking a bit all over the place for the Warriors. They threw everything at the Sharks last week as well, and the Sharks held firm. And you got to say Melbourne put up the best defensive effort of the weekend, and holding the Panthers to 0. So yeah, I expect Melbourne to come into this game with a very similar game plan. They know that the Warriors aren't the Warriors of old. They're not the Warriors that they put 70 points on a couple of years ago. So Melbourne will be treating this game very seriously. I think they do with every Warriors game. I just think Melbourne are looking a bit of a different team this year. Nelson should be back for this game, as well as Munster, although he is dealing with a groin. This game, I do think that for the Warriors, and I know that there's going to be an upset somewhere here, but I can't go against the form guide and the way that the Storm are looking and the Warriors just injury toll at the moment. I'm going to have to go with the Storm, 13 plus. Okay, for NRL Sunday, the first game takes us to Four Pines Park, where the Seagulls will be taking on the Roosters. And both teams came off a win in Vegas last week, so it's a good long break for them coming into this game. With the Sydney Roosters, the injury toll is a bit weird. I think we got Sua Wong with an ankle problem. Tupanua didn't finish the game either last week, so you could see a bit of Gus Crichton this week, and maybe Nat Butcher comes into the starting side, as well as Egan Butcher maybe moving on to the bench as well. So a bit of a shuffle there. And for Manly, Saab tore his hamstring, which is unfortunate because he looked great in stride last week. It looked like a pretty stock standard hamstring injury, pulled up very quickly, and you could even see him mouthing to the trainer, "I've done my hammy." So yeah, it's sad for Saab. Probably gives an opportunity to Raymond Vega though. He's a very different winger to Saab. Very short, very stocky. Remember a Justin Carney type winger. If you don't mind me harkening back to a bit of NRL history there. Very stocky winger. So yeah, I think Manly played very well last week. They seem to be in a big groove with Brooks. And Turbo working well down that left side. Although this week I do think it's a bit of a different story, and they don't tend to win games against the Roosters. Unfortunately, they've lost 7 out of the last 10 games against the Roosters. So yeah, unfortunately, I've got to go with the Roosters this week, 1-12. The final game of round 2 takes us to KO Stadium in Redcliffe, where we have the Dolphins taking on the Dragons. The Dragons looked pretty good last week. I thought that they came out of the blocks firing. Lomax was on fire on the wing, even though he said he doesn't want to play on the wing. So we'll see how that pans out for them. For the Dolphins, they were just not in the game against the Cowboys last week. They, I guess, came out with a bit of a on the back foot. They weren't really rushing up on the Cowboys, really giving them a lot of time to work, and you can't really give time to players like Drinkwater. And I expect it to be, if Sloan can back up his performance from last week, I expect it to be a very similar situation this week. I'm going to back St. George in this one. I do think that, once again, I think St. George really reeling from people saying that they're going to finish last this year. So I do think that they will come out with a bit of fire and start the season hot. I just expect them to fall away a little bit. And I think after watching the Dolphins on the weekend, I may need to rejig my ladder predictions a little bit. I think I had them finishing maybe 12th or 11th, something like that. I think they might be moving more towards that bottom 4 this year, and that's not really good for the game or for Dolphins fans. Yeah, in this one, I've got to go the Dragons, 13 plus. So that is it for this week's video, guys. Let me know what you think about my tips down in the comment section below. Please make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. We bring out so much content each and every week. Please make sure that you join our fantasy and tipping comps. The link is in the description. It's not too late, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.